One of the things that I find most fascinating about you, Ben, is you have an incredibly calming aura around you. Like, is that something you have always had, or is it something that's developed and you've become more aware of?
I think if I were to be honest about that, genetically, I'm probably a very calm person, but I had a very stressful, we'll call it, childhood. So I end up being very stressed, very anxious, very fearful, and ultimately very reactive. I went through my teenage years being very angry, abrasive, aggressive. And I don't think that's who I was. I think that's who I became based on having terrible nutrition as a child, having terrible sleep habits, having really no guidance, and a whole lot of stress and anxiety around me. A lot of alcoholism, a lot of substance abuse, a lot of aggression and rage and anger around myself and my family. So, that's kind of who I became. But I think looking at my genetics and looking at who I kind of am at my core, I tend to be a relatively happy, relatively calm, level-headed person. It just wasn't always that way.
Do you think your the way you felt when you were younger is how what pushed you into bodybuilding and training was a way to almost release that aggression and maybe energy?
Yeah, I think it was fear, to be honest. So I was a very, very fearful kid. So, I had a very aggressive dad. He had a very explosive temper. So I remember being, very, very young, and I never cried about it. I would just stand there and shake uncontrollably. Like I was so afraid and I would internalize it because I didn't want to say anything for fear that he would turn that aggression on me. Never did, to be honest. But there was always that fear of like you coming in the house and all the tables are turned upside down, and everything's broken, and you're like, oh my god, like, I could be dying. So I just stand there and shake. So I remember being in university, my first year of university. I was 19 years old, and talking to a professor and standing there shaking. And at that point, I was like, why is this here? Like, and I would stutter because I was so afraid. And I was like, why is this here? And I started to question that, like, well, that doesn't happen when I talk to my friends. That doesn't happen when I talk to, I don't know, my peers or other people who I'm comfortable with. Why does it happen when I'm talking to my potentially authorities? And then I tied it back to that relationship with my dad from, a time when it was pre-consciousness. I didn't know before I was 5 years old all the stuff that was happening in my life. It was just built into my physiology. It was built into my nervous system. So, all the way till I was 19, I had this ingrained fear that ultimately I think is why I went into bodybuilding, because I wanted to build this big armor and nobody could make me afraid anymore. When in reality, I didn't need the armor. I just needed to address where the fear was coming from. But the armor was certainly my greatest blessing, or one of my greatest blessings in life, was going through all of those struggles, all of those pains, and then unraveling the layers of the onion, so to speak. Is like, we see the superficial layer and you get through it and it's a struggle, and you realize there's just another layer there that's probably tougher and deeper and harder. But that's why we become the people we are.